From the Florida Atheist headquarters in Tampa, this is the Atheist Forum, a production of Florida Atheists Incorporated. Join us now for School Vouchers, Pro or Con, a debate on the validity of the Florida School Voucher Program. Speaking in favor of vouchers, Galen Matson, opposing Joe Reinhardt. And now, here's the moderator for this debate, Jim Peterson.
Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, as the case may be. Welcome to another fine episode of the Atheist Forum. I'm Jim Peterson, and to my right is Galen Matson, and to my left is Joe Reinhardt.
Thank you, Jim.
Who are our principal speakers today. And we're going to have a little bit of a discussion concerning the use of vouchers. As you know, during the past 30 or 50 years, there's been quite a lot of public controversy and discussion about our school system and how apparently deficient we are in the education of our youth, because we seem to produce people who lack some of the basic essentials in large number. And so various solutions have been attempted. Vouchers are one of them. Charter schools are another. And there have been several other methods as well that have been introduced into the public school system. But today we're just going to consider the issue of vouchers. And this is particularly appropriate since in Florida, former Governor Jeb Bush introduced in his administration a pro-voucher program, and that got a lot of attention. And we have before the present legislature other points about vouchers. So we've not had a coin toss, so it's going to be hard to tell who to go to first here.
I will yield to mine.
No, quite the contrary. We haven't really defined exactly what parameters we would have for the debate, which one normally does. I thought having an open-ended debate was not a bad idea.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is,
as it gets.
without sounding too prejudiced, and that is that I have heard, I think, most of the arguments having to do with vouchers, but I have heard those from conservative sorts and religious sorts who basically I've never really paid them much attention for the simple reason that I felt rather strongly that they were simply lying, that they were misrepresenting the effect and the purposes of vouchers. So since Galen is the only person I've ever met whose opinion I actually respect, who wants to argue in favor of vouchers, it's almost essential that he tell me what his reasons are, because I have no idea.
It should be said
what they might be. I don't have any.
That we have kind of an academic case here, in that we're not discussing any official policy of any kind, but we're having an exchange of ideas, and we're, I think, about to hear some that are going to be unusual and different in terms of what Galen has to offer in support of the notion of having vouchers. So Galen, we'll turn it over to you.
Okay. Well, I guess we should first agree on what our goals are in education. We are trying to provide a public service, which means that we need to have the best education for the largest number of children as possible, because it is essential for outcomes later in life, how productive they're going to be in society, what their future poverty or crime rates are going to be. Education is one of the single largest determinants of your future fluency, or the opposite, or whatever the case may be. So we agree, I hope, that the goal of the education system is to try and maximize our productivity and capabilities of our individual citizens.
I'll agree that ought to be the goal.
And it's essential for a functioning civil society.
I think we all agree on that.
So it's a matter of how do we achieve those goals, and what we're sort of boiling this down to two solutions. It's either going to be one that is entirely publicly administered, or one that is privately administered, in short. So we can either have a system which is designed, funded, and officiated through the government at the state and or federal level, or one that is managed by the federal government. I'm not here to support any particular version of vouchers, but I am here to support the idea of school choice and of diversity in education. So my position is that in America we have a large number of children that fall through the cracks, particularly in poor communities, particularly in the inner cities, and we haven't quite been able to get at that, and I think that's for a number of reasons. The most common thing that I hear, and stop me if I'm monopolizing the microphone, but the most common thing I hear is that it's just a matter of funding. Well, according to the latest report by the OECD, which does one of the most comprehensive studies of international education systems, the United States spends fifth internationally on per student, is fifth in expenditure on education, which is quite the opposite of what we've been told this entire time. And if you add in post-high school contributions from public funding, we're actually number one.
I ask you to unravel the acronym. OECD stands for?
The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development.
Very good, thank you.
And they do what's called the PISA study, which is probably one of the most broad and comprehensive studies of educational attainment across the world. And I don't have a graphic for the camera, but what I brought is an excerpt from that report, which shows how the countries ranked by annual expenditure per student by educational institution from primary through tertiary school. And you'll see the United States is actually way at the top. We spend a lot more than the OECD average, and that is averaging countries which have excellent educational outcomes like Sweden, Denmark, the Netherlands, Singapore, Hong Kong, and we get, I would say, a very average outcome for an above average expenditure.
Are these figures for public and private schools
Yes.
combined?
Yes.
Yes, okay, fine. So it doesn't really distinguish whether the fact that we spend more than all of these other countries and much higher than the average, it doesn't distinguish whether or not the effectiveness, it doesn't reflect the effectiveness of public education. It just says this is what we spend more than other people.
Well,
on
and it
education.
also reflects the investment in public education by other countries. There are other countries that spend more per capita on private education. There are others that spend more per capita on public education. And even their combined effects per capita, they don't spend as much as we do. We actually have a healthy obsession with education in the United States, but for some reason we continue to get, I'm not going to say that they're bad. I'm not here to condemn the American school system because it's actually not as bad as people say that it is. But for the amount that we spend, I think we get a very average outcome, and there are mechanisms, I believe, that would produce better, healthier, more productive children through the American education system.
And speaking of health, it sounds like what you're saying is that our education system is much like our healthcare system,
Right.
in that we pay more and get less than other countries do. And it probably applies to a good many other things, too. So a more fundamental question then would be, why is this the case?
My opinion is that it has it goes back to the people that originally framed this debate, which were on the American right and the American left. And the American right was perfectly happy to make this a matter of state versus religion. They wanted, Christian conservatives specifically, wanted this to be their mechanism to get faith back into the schools and to use it as a mechanism for the public indoctrination.
Stop right there, because that's exactly true.
Joe.
And while I would agree that it would be great if we maximize the efficiency and the dollar return on our investment in education, I think you can make a strong case for the fact that vouchers are not a very effective way to do that. And there's nothing that can't be learned in the public school that can't be learned in a private school. Yeah, but the point I want to make is that the whole voucher question is basically, as I said at the onset, is dishonest. It's not about quality of education. It's about having the public fund religious education, because 90+% of the vouchers in this state and every other state go to fund religious schools. And this, interestingly enough, is kind of a backlash from Madeleine Murray O'Hair. Prior to the prayer in school decision, there were a couple of thousand private schools in the United States. Within 10 years of O'Hair versus Maryland, is that it? Murray versus Maryland? There were 20 or 30,000 of them, okay? Now, there was a big push back in the late 19th century to allow for public funding of Catholic schools in particular, and that went nowhere, and we still have the Blaine Amendment, as they are called, in something like 30-some-odd states, which specifically says you can't give money to private schools, sectarian or secular. And so my argument with the voucher system begins and rests primarily on the fact that it is a bold-faced lie. All it is wanting you and Jim and me to pay to indoctrinate someone's child that they're not willing to pay for themselves. And I'm not willing to subsidize religion, period.
Let me ask you for just a moment, is Florida on the list of those states with a Blaine Amendment?
Yes, it is. So that's a reason I was about to get to, which is it's patently unconstitutional in this state to do that. So,
what I was getting at originally is that, I mean, I agree with what you said, actually. The religious right views this as an opportunity to indoctrinate children. They're certainly concerned.
Well, they view it that way because it is an opportunity.
They're certainly concerned about being sure that their own children are educated in an environment where they will receive their preferred dogma. But what this is about is, I think, ideally, is to get your children into an environment where they receive their preferred dogma. What we have allowed was for the religious right, and to an extent the progressive left, to frame this debate. And it's become about religion versus, I'm not sure it's even about, like, religious versus secularism, because if you look at other private school systems throughout the world, there's many countries that have massive private school systems where over 75% of all children attend private schools, and they are publicly financed 100%. And they are secular. They are entirely secular. In fact, they don't even have this debate about whether there should be prayer in school or whether you can use public funds to attend a religious school. Like, the answer is just no. You can use public funds to attend a government-managed private school, and the government sets the standards for the curriculum, and they actively regulate the way that the schools are run, and they enforce very common sense standards.
If we had a system that even remotely approached that, we don't even have that idea. We don't even have that as a goal.
Well, and that's because we allowed this debate to be set up by the wrong people. It doesn't have to be a debate about whether we're going to have religious indoctrination in schools or publicly funded schools. It should be about how we're going to just best craft a secular school system that's publicly financed.
Thank you, because there are countries, as you said, that where 75% of the students do go to private schools. There are countries where the students go to school for life as long as they're qualified and as long as they put forth the effort for free.
Right.
And that,
and also pay for pre-K and tertiary
education. And that is the system that we really ought to have in this country. There is, to my knowledge, no penalty for being too educated, at least as a country. I know we talk all the time about the intellectual elites and that sort of thing, but it's not true. The fact of the matter is that education is good for us as a society, and that what we ought to have, rather than vouchers, is free education for everyone who's qualified and willing to work for it, for as long as they're willing to
so we've made
deserve
some sort of stabbing attempts at achieving a system like that. The GI Bill is an excellent example. The GI Bill is a voucher system. It doesn't say that we're going to give money to a local college and you can attend that local college. It says that we're going to finance you as a student. Same thing with Pell Grants. That is a voucher system. And it's been incredibly effective.
Well, yes, but at that age, you're far less likely to be influenced by the surroundings of your educational environment than the 6-year-old child coming into the Evangelical United Brethren Day School.
Well, under any system that I'm going to propose in the course of this conversation, none of them are going to involve Catholic schools or any sort of religious school. I'm proposing that we fund through some mechanism. There's alternatives to vouchers, but they ultimately involve transferring public money to schools to teach students, and it allows for a large diversity of schooling techniques and school types, but none of them are religious schools. That, in my opinion, is a violation of the Establishment Clause, and it's simply a non-starter.
I would support an activity along that line, but I think it has about as much chance of success as the Pope's annual prayer for peace.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, but I think a lot of people, though, are taken with the notion and exemplified in the New York City school system, where there are whole high schools devoted to different areas of technology and math and science and drama and the fine arts and music and so forth. They just if you have a voucher system, then the student can use the voucher to go to a school with the particular kind of emphasis that they are interested in learning about. So to the extent, apparently to that extent, the idea has merit. The problem is, as you've pointed out, is that it gets hijacked. The whole argument gets hijacked by the religious right, and perhaps our basic problem is that the political power of the political right is undermining everything, vouchers and everything else.
Well, I think the public has demonstrated that they're not wild about having religious schools either. If you look at the growth of charter schools, which are government managed and secular, most of the enrollment at charter schools has come at the expense of private schools. Parents that have demonstrated that they're interested in educational mobility for their own children have, shown us that it's not that they want their kid to go to a Catholic school. They want their kid to go to a good school. And if their only option is a Catholic school as opposed to, some inner city school. Or,
I have friends who have made that same argument. Yes.
Sure. That they would rather have their children attend a secular school than a religious one. So what I'm saying, we need to do the right thing by most American citizens. They don't want a sectarian education for their children, but they do want a better one. And we're not giving them a better option by allowing the religious right to say that it's either going to be religious schools or, awful public schools.
Well, Galen, there's one other aspect of this which it seems to me is kind of important, and that is question regarding how money, public money, is dispersed for vouchers. Instead of improving the existing public school system, hiring better teachers, having newer books, or in some cases just having books, and a decent physical infrastructure and so forth. In other words, making the schools more successful by applying more resources to them.
I've already pointed out, we already put tremendous resources into education, and we're somehow not able to square this circle. And the argument that we should not support we should not support school choice because it'll divert resources from public schools is, saying that we should not risk imperiling the good out of solidarity with the bad. I think it's terrible reason to say that we shouldn't do something because we might imperil something that just...
The public school system in this country basically started after the Civil War to educate blacks, and it's been tremendously successful. It has produced some rather startlingly brilliant people, one exception being myself, but I am a product of the public schools. But the point is that public education seems to work pretty well. As I say, there's nothing you can't learn in a public school that you can learn in a private school. But this is a lot more than just quality of education and dollars for education. It's about destroying the teachers' union, which is one of the few remaining unions that still wields significant power in this or any other state. And so it's a political ploy to basically disempower, disenfranchise the Democratic Party or the liberal or the progressive half or portion, however much it may be, of our society. So there are really rather insidious reasons for it to occur. And one more point having to do with dollars, which is brief, and that is we know for certain that the major influence on the success of children at school, apart from genetics, is their parents and their early preschool education. If we took all of this money that we are squandering on vouchers and private schools and other sleights of hand, and spent it on daycare and preschool, so that when a kid came into school, he could already at least read and write and speak halfway decent English, which is another point. The public schools have to take all comers. The private schools don't. If we did that, that would solve a big chunk of our problems with any school, public or private, right there. But we won't do that. They just cut back on preschool.
I really think you're making my case for me.
Thank you.
So if the problem is about having more targeted programs that can reach out to more diverse communities,
and vouchers aren't the solution to that problem.
Well, if we allow for educational choice and we allow schools to say, okay, this is my my community, and I have a large community of Turks or of Moroccans or something like this is how the Netherlands got at their problem. So in the 1970s, this was an issue in Europe. They had this huge influx of immigrants, and that created all kinds of social problems. They had increasing poverty and crime rates because they had a lot of people coming to Europe that were either refugees or just looking for better economic situations, sort of like we've had with Mexico over the last several decades. And they had these problems emerged of social inequality, whereas they'd done excellent jobs up until then of normalizing their social stratification and reducing the gaps between the rich and poor, particularly in educational outcomes. All of a sudden they saw rising gaps because they had new communities forming of people that were first or second generation immigrants. They didn't speak the language. They didn't have the requisite skills to get along well in their societies. And the Netherlands, they had this problem to the same extent or more than most countries in Western Europe had. And their solution was to use their private education system to come up with more effective, more creative measures to bridge that gap to disenfranchised communities. And the way that they did that was that they financed students. They don't throw money at their education system. They value the student is what is the unit of value.
Yes, but again,
that private.
that's the sincere goal.
Yeah, sure.
It's not a sleight of hand. Thank you.
If your
Yes,
sincere goal.
yes, but it isn't.
I mean, I'm not gonna pick up that brick and defend school vouchers for private schools. That's not what I support. It's
Oh, I'm sorry, I misunderstood
it's
that.
about valuing students individually and saying that. So if a student requires X more investment to achieve a optimal outcome, or at least one that approaches what better off students, more affluent students in that same community can get, then that simply means that we invest more into that student. We don't just throw money at a monolithic education system, which is what we've done. That's why we have the most expensive education system in the world right now. We solve this problem like the Defense Department does. If we can't figure it out, we just hurl money at the problem and it just grows. I mean, you solve it a little bit.
No, Jim made the analogy with the healthcare system.
But
It's
yeah, the
very-
healthcare system,
very similar.
it does help a little, but it's not efficient.
May I interject here? What do you think? I mean, we seem to be pretty much agreed that an enormous amount of money has been spent on educational systems and personnel and buildings and all this, but to little apparent effect. So my question would be, well, what sort of impediments exist in society at large that are preventing our educational system from turning out the kind of high-quality minds that for which we have so much regard? Or maybe the question is, do we? America has a long tradition of anti-intellectualism, even noted as early as 1835 by Alexis de
We also have a long
Tocqueville.
tradition of intellectualism. We're just
Yeah, well, that's also true, but the anti-intellectual element has been very strong
In the political
popular
realm.
culture of our time and back through most of the period of U.S. Development. Now, you would think that this might change because of the tremendous technological revolution that we have experienced, and because books are commonplace and the internet is now with us and so on and so forth. But look at what's on the internet. It's terrible. I mean, low-grade morons seem to occupy most of the response, most of the chat rooms, and all this kind of stuff. So the question is, what can we do to improve the quality of life to the extent that people will have a much higher regard? Let me illustrate with one more point, and that is the whole question of how people view science. Polls continue to show, all the most recent polls continue to show that most people do not believe in fundamental scientific concepts. Things like evolution and the Big Bang, and even where the Earth is in regard to the sun, and on it goes. What do we do about that? How do we get a campaign going to get people interested in genuine education, in understanding ourselves and our universe?
Well, I mean, to stay focused on the ideas of school choice, you can give them what they want. Say, okay, you want to have a voucher system and attend schools. We're going to set the curricula, but yeah, you can have school choice. And you're not going to say a prayer before class, but you can certainly have your choice of schools.
Well, what does that mean, though? A choice of what?
I mean, they're right now they have an easy target with the public education system because they can point to its numerous failures and say, see, this is why we should have our own schools and we should be able to get public money to finance it, or we should get public money for homeschooling, or any manner of absurdity can be defended in this area. If we create school diversity and we say, okay, yes, there are failing schools in this community, and we'll give you the option to send your children to schools that are better targeted towards their educational needs, or that have that score better or have better educational outcomes, but they all have a base curriculum that's set according to government standards, and they are, I have to keep repeating, they are secular.
So experimentalism would be one of your principles.
How would you require that? How would you require somebody to use their freedom of choice to go to a secular school?
Well,
And what makes you think
we
that?
do that right now.
What makes you think that secular schools will pop up on every street corner? That the minute you open the door, it turns out to be a Christian Science reading room.
I mean, they can try, but they would be breaking the law if they accepted public money. Because I mean, if you take money from the government, it of course comes with the government stipulations.
I'll be candid. I strongly dislike the voucher system as it exists.
I don't like it either.
I would agree that there may be some system, but it would have to involve some sort of public education or free education for all. That's the great equalizer.
Yes.
But the fact of the matter is I'm not an expert on educational theory or practice, and I have no solutions to this problem other than a big yardstick.
I don't think anybody has.
And you speak softly.
Yeah, sorry.
Nobody has the ballistic missile for this problem. So my proposal is that we allow for some diversity. We set minimum standards, but we allow for some diversity in education. We allow institutions to try different methods.
And the moment the state institutes this voucher system as it now exists, you can kiss that idea goodbye.
Well, and again, I think that's because we allowed the tail ends of the political spectrum to frame this conversation for us. If progressives had been at the helm of this from the very beginning, then it would be an entirely different conversation.
Reasonable people such as ourselves.
I think so.
Yes.
Yes. There's no doubt, but between the three of us, we could come up with something completely rational.
I have a plan.
Utterly, yes, you have a plan. Might be willing to go along with that, I think. Yours too.
No, there's no question that we all want what's best for our children and what's best for society, but I think we diverge rather quickly, not you and I necessarily, but we, meaning the people who are supporting this voucher cause, because it's a sham. It really is nothing what it's purported to be, and it's just a disaster waiting to happen. And even if it's not a disaster, it's nothing short of theft, basically. It's taking my money to support your religion, and that is wrong on any level, period.
I agree, and I certainly hope that that there's a lot of voucher systems on the state level that are in the works, but I can't see many of those surviving a Supreme Court challenge.
The one in Cleveland did, even though they acknowledged that 95+% of them were going to religious schools, that they won that case.
Well, now, of course, the other part of the voucher program is the issue of charter schools. Charter schools have been started by a great many groups, again,
Yeah.
most of them religious, of course.
Right.
Some of them secular, some of them experimental, but mostly religious. But to what extent does society benefit from having more different types of schools, like we discussed earlier about the New York City school system?
I'm not sure they're great examples. I believe that charter schools, to receive public funding, they still have to accept the state educational curricula.
They have no testing or investigative or requirements whatsoever. Unlike a public school that has to meet all kinds of requirements, the principal of any charter school could work part-time as the CEO of NAMBLA if he wants to, as far as I know.
I can't defend that, but I think what is probably a bigger story in educational innovation has been the magnet schools. I have friends who have children that attend magnet schools, and they were having difficulty in regular school. Like I myself was a problem student. I went to 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and 3 high schools. Because my dad was in the Army, so I kind of got to tour the global education system as a young man. and I didn't do great. I did passably in school, but after I barely graduated. But I mean, after school, once I entered the workforce, I did just fine. So I mean, I don't think my grades in those schools were necessarily a good reflection of what my individual capability was. And I think that's the same problem for most students that tend to fall through the cracks. They're met with this very stark and monolithic type of school system, and it's not a necessarily a very natural setting.
Well, it's a bore for anybody that's above average. It's boring as hell. It's the main problem with it.
Well, I have seen how well my friends' children have been able to do in magnet programs, where they're certainly still having problems with their.
No, I like the magnet school idea.
They've
I do.
Found somewhere to excel, whether it's for music or for technical skills. I think these are the kind of things where we can get at those children that are in the margins, and that's that's the most important thing.
My observation with school choice, I don't know if it's still true, but I guess it's probably more true. But when I went to school, people went to change schools, tried to get into some different school districts, primarily for sports. They're a football team. That's why I want to go to this high school. Just because some of the reasons are vacuous doesn't mean it's not a good idea, but.
Yeah.
Well, undoubtedly magnet schools are very attractive, but
I think so. And if you look, I went to school in Germany for 2.5 years, and they have an interesting, at least for the German schools, you are only required to attend higher education up until like the age of 16, then to attend a regular school. And if you decide to, you can go on to some sort of technical program. If it's not for you, it's not the end of your schooling. You go on to a technical program where you learn an essential skill. You're still required to take to follow a curriculum of some sort, but they realize early on that not everybody's going to be in Calculus 3 by the time they graduate. So
Yeah, you need that at the supermarket.
right. Well, I mean, ideally we could have everybody graduating with phenomenal mathematical skills, but for one reason or another, just not every student is into it. So I mean, again, we need options for how to deal with particularly these marginal students. When they're stuck in this vice, they see it as a zero-sum game. Like I'm either not going to graduate at all. Like I'm not good at this. I'm not good at education or academia, so it's wasted on me. We're not giving them any of their options. Like you have to complete this program and graduate, or we're gonna hold you back. We're gonna you'll just have to wait till you're old enough to drop out.
You should read Summerhill.
We've given them a terrible option. This doesn't mean that those are necessarily stupid people or bad kids. A lot of them, it was never prioritized for them by their parents, and our system as it exists, I think, gives up on them. Whereas we should develop alternatives so that we can better fit more children into society and into the workforce, and we'll have a more productive and equitable system in the long run if we embrace school choice.
when you say that if our culture embraced the notion of curiosity, inquisitiveness, and excitement about finding new knowledge, that most education, the best education, is self-education. You can possess all the degrees in the world, but I've known a lot of people who have many degrees and who are basically dull, boring, uninteresting, and uninterested people. So it seems to me that a good education system is one that induces its students to take on the burden of learning because of the rewards of
If it's something that the student wants to learn or enjoys learning, it's not a problem to teach it to him. In fact, you can't stop them.
Yeah.
Okay, try to stop a child from learning to speak its native tongue. Good luck with that.
Yes. True.
Right.
Well, I believe that we may have come.
Exhausted everyone. I mean, our time.
That's right. Everybody looks tuckered out. We've have absolutely no ideas whatsoever. I don't know how far we are along the way in this production, but are there any concluding remarks that perhaps you might like each of you to make that would perhaps expose some other interesting tidbits that you might want to reveal?
I have one sentence, I think, maybe two, and that is education can and ought to be the most wonderful, exciting, self-satisfying experience of a lifetime. The fact that it often isn't is a crime against humanity. What we can do to improve that is and has been a matter of debate since day one. I think that the ability to choose those subjects that are more of interest to you certainly ought to be essential to your education, but being able to do that on the public nickel, particularly for the true reason of brainwashing the kid, whether he happens to subscribe to your particular religion or ideals or not, is a bad idea, and vouchers ought to fail for that reason.
I think we can look at the Taliban as an excellent example.
Yeah, right. What we need is more madrasas here in the U.S. And that's what vouchers will give us.
I'd like to point out that our entire philosophy of education isn't necessarily something that's easy for humans to get along in. Our educational system, whatever it is, as it's formulated, isn't necessarily a natural state for human beings. I mean, if you imagine human children up until this fairly recent phenomenon of massive public education programs, they learned about the world through open and free association with their community and their environment. And it's only recently that we've come up with this system where we take little children and we give them this schedule like military recruits, and we say get up at 06, be on the bus at 07, you're in class at 08, and you sit there for 6 hours, no talking, face forward. We jam these books full of esoteric material under their noses, and tell them that if they don't take it seriously, their future is going to be uncertain and impoverished. This is not anything approaching a natural state. So we're trying to figure out how to address a very difficult problem to solve. And my position is that we can get closer to a better solution by honestly exploring alternatives. And that should happen through a secular system of publicly financed.
We are in agreement. I hate that word. It's not even a word. I agree with that. Secular is the key word.
We are in agreement, Mr. Reinhardt.
Thank you, sir.
Indeed. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've heard today's debate, and I think we all know that the clear winner here is you, because you've had an opportunity to hear some of the best minds that we have on offer here about a subject which is often controversial and in which there is a great deal of misleading information. So I hope you come away from today's discussion, with some new insights and new ideas. In the meantime, this is the Florida Atheist Forum, and thank you very much. My name is Jim Peterson. Good night.
Thank you for listening to the Atheist Forum. The Atheist Forum comes to you from the Atheists of Florida, a nonprofit membership organization that brings atheists together to become aware of state-church separation issues and to stand up for our constitutionally guaranteed freedom from religion. To learn more about Atheists of Florida, write Post Office Box 130753, Tampa, Florida 33681, or email us at atheistforum@aol.com. And be with us next week for more talk and talk back about freedom from religion here on the Atheist Forum.